I sat in that cold courtroom, my hands shaking as I watched my own son point at me like I was a stranger. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across his face. Marcus stood behind his lawyer's table, wearing his best suit, looking confident and smug. "Your Honor," his attorney said, "Mrs. Willis is clearly mentally unfit to handle such a large sum of money. The evidence shows she's been making irrational decisions since receiving the settlement." My heart pounded so hard I thought everyone could hear it. This was my boy, the child I raised alone after his father died. The same kid I worked 2 jobs to support. Now he was telling a judge I was crazy. The lawyer continued reading from a stack of papers, listing made-up examples of my supposed instability. Marcus nodded along, occasionally glancing at me with those cold eyes I didn't recognize anymore. The judge frowned as he listened, occasionally looking my way with concern. I felt my cheeks burn with shame and disbelief. How had it come to this? "Given the serious nature of these allegations," the judge announced, "I'm ordering a temporary freeze on Mrs. Willis's accounts, pending further investigation." Marcus smiled. He thought he'd already won. "My name is Frankie Willis, and 6 months ago I was just a regular widow trying to get through each day. I lived in the same small house where my husband Tom and I had spent 35 happy years together. After he passed from cancer, I thought the worst pain of my life was behind me. Tom had been everything to me. We met in high school, married young, and built a simple but beautiful life together. He worked at the factory while I cleaned offices at night. We never had much money, but we had each other. When the doctors told us about the cancer, Tom made me promise to keep fighting no matter what happened. Those last months were the hardest thing I'd ever faced. Watching the love of your life fade away piece by piece breaks something inside you that never quite heals. The insurance company fought us for months before Tom died. They claimed his workplace exposure to chemicals wasn't their fault, but my husband was a fighter, and he made sure I had a good lawyer. 2 months after Tom's funeral, the call came, $5 million. The settlement for his wrongful death. That's when everything changed, and not in the way you think. For 23 years after high school, Marcus barely called. Maybe twice a year on holidays, if I was lucky. He lived 3 states away with his wife Angela and their twin boys. I sent birthday cards and Christmas presents that were rarely acknowledged. But suddenly, after the settlement news hit our small town, Marcus was at my door with flowers and a huge smile. "Mom, I've been thinking," he said, setting a beautiful bouquet on my kitchen table. "Angela and I want to spend more time with you. You shouldn't be alone in this big house." I was so happy I almost cried. My grief over Tom had been overwhelming, and the thought of rebuilding a relationship with my son felt like a gift from heaven. Marcus started visiting every weekend. He brought groceries, helped with yard work, and talked about moving me closer to his family. For the first time in months, I felt hopeful about the future. But something felt off. He kept making comments about my big windfall and how I must be overwhelmed by all those financial decisions. When I mentioned maybe taking a trip to Europe like Tom and I had always planned, Marcus frowned. Then one evening I heard him on the phone outside. "Once she signs it over, we'll finally be set." The next morning, I gathered my courage and gently asked Marcus about the phone conversation. My heart was racing, hoping I'd misunderstood. He laughed and waved his hand dismissively. "Mom, you're being paranoid. I was talking to Angela about work stuff." But his laugh sounded forced, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Marcus, I heard you say something about me signing something over," I pressed, trying to keep my voice calm. His expression changed. The warm smile disappeared, replaced by something colder. "Mom, maybe you're more confused than I thought. This is exactly what I'm worried about." "What do you mean?" "All this money, all these decisions. Maybe you're too emotional right now to handle everything properly. Tom just died, and you're not thinking clearly." The words hit me like a slap. I'd raised this man, worked myself to the bone for him, and now he was calling me confused and emotional. "I'm thinking perfectly clearly," I said firmly. He shrugged. "If you say so, Mom, but Angela and I are just concerned about you making good choices." That afternoon, his mother-in-law Agnes showed up at my door. She'd never visited before. "Don't worry, dear," she said with a sickly sweet smile. We'll make sure everything's handled properly. Over the next few weeks, Marcus and Agnes started a slow, steady campaign to make me doubt myself. They'd ask if I'd taken my medication, even though I wasn't on any. They'd mention how forgetful I seemed, pointing out normal things like misplacing my keys. "Mom, you told me you wanted chicken for dinner, but you bought fish," Marcus would say, shaking his head sadly. I knew I'd never said anything about chicken, but he'd repeat these stories to Angela on the phone, loud enough for me to hear. "She's getting worse," he'd whisper. "I'm really worried about her handling all that money." Agnes started visiting daily, bringing casseroles I didn't want and staying for hours. She'd rearrange my kitchen, then act concerned when I couldn't find things. "Oh, honey, you moved the sugar to a different cabinet yesterday," she'd say with fake worry. "Don't you remember?" They made me feel like I was going crazy. Every normal mistake became evidence of my declining mental state. When I got confused about which day it was after a restless night, Agnes wrote it down in a little notebook. "Just keeping track," she said. "The doctor might want to know about these episodes." I hadn't been to any doctor, but they talked about my condition like it was already diagnosed. One morning, I found a thick legal document on my kitchen table. I hadn't left it there, which meant Marcus had used his key to enter while I was sleeping. The papers were for a power of attorney, giving Marcus complete control over my finances. At the bottom was a yellow sticky note in his handwriting. "For your own protection, Mom, just sign and date." My hands trembled as I read through the legal language. If I signed this, Marcus would control every penny of Tom's settlement money. I'd have to ask permission for everything. When Marcus arrived that afternoon, I was holding the papers. "Oh good, you found them," he said casually. "My lawyer friend drew those up to help protect you." "I'm not signing this," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. His cheerful mask dropped instantly. "What do you mean you're not signing it?" "I mean no. I don't need protection from my own money." Marcus's face reddened. "Mom, you're being selfish. This isn't just about you anymore. I have a family to think about, boys who need college funds." "Then work for it like your father and I did." He stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. "Fine. Don't worry about protecting your family. I'll handle this my way." He stormed out, leaving the papers scattered on my floor. 1 week later, a sheriff's deputy knocked on my door. He handed me an official envelope with my name typed on the front. Inside were court papers. My son was filing to have me declared legally incompetent to handle my own affairs. I read the petition 3 times before the words really sank in. Marcus was asking a judge to take away my rights as an adult. The document claimed I was suffering from severe mental decline and poses a danger to herself and others through reckless financial decisions. My legs gave out, and I collapsed into Tom's old recliner. This was really happening. My own child was trying to destroy me in court. The worst part was reading the attached statements from neighbors. Mrs. Peterson from next door claimed I'd been acting erratically and talking to myself. Mr. Jackson across the street said I'd been aggressive and paranoid during a recent conversation. None of it was true. Mrs. Peterson barely knew me, and I'd only spoken to Mr. Jackson once in the past year to ask about his new fence. But there it was in black and white, making me sound like a crazy person who couldn't be trusted with a grocery list, let alone $5 million. The court date was set for 2 weeks away. I had 14 days to prove I wasn't losing my mind. Agnes wasted no time spreading her poison through our small town. Within days, I could feel the whispers following me everywhere I went. At the grocery store, conversations stopped when I walked down the aisles. The cashier, who'd known me for 15 years, avoided eye contact and spoke in careful, gentle tones like I might break. "How are you doing today, Frankie?" she asked slowly, as if I couldn't understand normal speech. At the bank, the teller called her manager over when I tried to make a simple withdrawal. They huddled together, glancing at me with concerned expressions. "Mrs. Willis, are you sure you want to take out this much cash?" the manager asked about my $100 withdrawal. The humiliation burned in my chest. These people had known me my whole life, and now they were treating me like a mental patient because of Agnes's lies. I stopped going to my usual coffee shop after I overheard 2 women discussing my condition at the next table. "Such a shame," one said. Agnes says she's completely lost touch with reality since that settlement money came through. My best friend Carol called one evening, her voice worried. Frankie, I need to warn you. Marcus met with that lawyer downtown, the one who handles elder abuse cases. Word is he's digging through your medical records looking for ammunition. I knew I needed help, so I called the only lawyer in town I trusted, Michael Hayes. He'd handled Tom's will and had always been straight with me. Michael's office felt safe and familiar with its old wooden desk and family photos on the walls, but his expression was serious as he read through Marcus's petition. Frankie, I'm going to be blunt with you, he said, setting the papers down. This isn't just about money. Your son is trying to destroy your reputation and your independence. If he wins, you'll never get either back. My stomach twisted. What can I do? Fight back. Hard. These neighbors who supposedly witnessed your erratic behavior, I bet will find they barely know you. The medical records he's trying to access. I can block those if there's no real evidence of mental decline. Michael leaned forward. But here's what worries me. This kind of case gets ugly fast. Are you prepared for your son to say terrible things about you in public? I thought about Tom, about his strength during those final months. He'd faced cancer without flinching. I could face this. What do you recommend? Michael smiled for the first time. If you're willing to let me, I have a plan that might turn the tables on him. Do it. Our first court appearance was in 2 days. Michael had spent the time gathering real evidence and preparing our defense. Walking into that courtroom took every ounce of courage I had. Marcus sat at the plaintiff's table with his attorney, looking confident and well-dressed. Agnes was in the front row, whispering to a woman I didn't recognize. When Michael presented our evidence, the mood shifted quickly. He had proof that Mrs. Peterson barely knew me and that Mr. Jackson had been coached on what to say. Both neighbors had received visits from Agnes before writing their statements. Your Honor, Michael said, these so-called witness statements were clearly fabricated. Mrs. Peterson admitted to my investigator that she was simply repeating gossip she'd heard from Mrs. Agnes Hartwell. The judge frowned as he read through our documentation. Marcus's confident smile started to waver. Furthermore, Michael continued, my client has no history of mental illness, is not on any psychiatric medication, and has been managing her affairs independently for 62 years. I felt a small flame of hope flicker in my chest. Maybe the truth would win after all. But as we packed up our papers, Marcus walked past my table and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "This is just the beginning, Mom." A week later, Michael called with disturbing news. During discovery, he'd found something that made my blood run cold. Frankie, your son filed a document claiming you already signed over partial control of your accounts to him 3 months ago, Michael said. The signature looks like yours, but the timing doesn't match your story. I felt the room spin. I never signed anything like that. I didn't think so. I'm requesting a handwriting expert to examine the signature. 2 days before our next hearing, the expert's report came back. The signature was definitely forged, but not by Marcus. In court, the handwriting specialist testified that the forged signature had been written by a woman with arthritis in her dominant hand. Agnes sat in the gallery, her face growing paler by the minute. Based on the hand tremor patterns and pen pressure, the expert explained, this signature was written by Mrs. Agnes Hartwell, not Mrs. Frankie Willis. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Agnes shrank down in her seat, trying to become invisible. But Marcus showed no shame at all. If anything, his smug expression grew more pronounced. Just when I thought we'd scored a major victory, Marcus's lawyer stood up with a new bombshell. Your Honor, we have one more witness. Mrs. Betty Sullivan will testify that Mrs. Shrike Willis once threatened to take her own life during a moment of apparent mental instability. Betty Sullivan was my neighbor from 2 blocks away. I barely knew her beyond polite waves when we passed on the street, but there she was, swearing under oath that I'd told her I didn't want to go on living. My heart shattered as she spoke. The story she told was detailed and convincing. According to Betty, I'd stopped her during a walk and confessed that I was planning to hurt myself because I couldn't handle life without Tom. None of it was true, but she delivered every lie with convincing emotion. She looked so lost and desperate, Betty testified, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "I've been worried about her ever since. I started crying right there in the courtroom. Not because I believed her lies, but because I realized how deep this conspiracy went. How many people had Marcus corrupted with his promises?" Michael tried to cross-examine Betty, but her story was too polished. Someone had coached her well. As the judge called for a recess, I felt like I was drowning. Everything was spinning out of control, and my own son was orchestrating my destruction. That's when I leaned over and whispered to Michael, "I know exactly what to do." That night, I went through every box in my basement until I found what I was looking for: Tom's old recording equipment. He'd been a ham radio operator and had kept detailed logs of all his conversations. If Marcus wanted to play dirty, I could play dirty too. I spent the next week carefully documenting everything. I recorded phone calls where Marcus pressured me to sign papers. I saved voicemails where he talked about managing Mom's money for her own good. Most importantly, I discovered something that made my blood boil. While going through my mail, I found pre-approval letters for loans Marcus had applied for using my settlement as collateral. He'd been so sure he'd win my money that he'd already started spending it. 3 credit card applications in his name listed my address and mentioned the anticipated inheritance he'd be receiving soon. The dates were from right after Tom's settlement was announced. Michael's eyes lit up when I showed him the evidence. "Frankie, this changes everything. Your son hasn't just been planning to take your money, he's been taking out debt against it. This shows clear financial motivation for fraud." For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt like we might actually win, but I also felt something else, a deep sadness that my relationship with my son was gone forever. Our next court date arrived, and I was ready. Michael had prepared a devastating presentation that would expose Marcus for the greedy fraud he was. "Your Honor," Michael began, "I'd like to present evidence that the plaintiff has been actively borrowing money against the defendant's settlement, believing he would gain control of it through this court proceeding." He handed the judge copies of all the loan applications and credit card approvals. Marcus's face went white as his own signatures were displayed on the courtroom screen. "These documents show that Mr. Willis applied for over $300,000 in loans and credit using his mother's settlement as anticipated collateral. The dates prove he was planning this legal action long before filing his petition." The judge studied the papers with growing disapproval. "Mr. Willis, did you take out loans against money that didn't belong to you?" Marcus's lawyer whispered frantically in his ear, but Marcus was too angry to listen to advice. "That money should be mine," he shouted, jumping to his feet. "I'm her only family. Who else is going to get it when she dies?" The judge's gavel came down hard. "Mr. Willis, you will control yourself in my courtroom." But the damage was done. Everyone had heard his real feelings. The judge was clearly losing patience with Marcus's behavior. After reviewing all our evidence, he issued a sharp warning. "Mr. Willis, the court is deeply concerned about your financial motivations in this case. Taking out loans against funds you don't own raises serious questions about your credibility." Marcus squirmed in his seat while his lawyer tried to do damage control. But there was no explaining away those loan applications. Agnes had stopped coming to court after the forgery revelation. She was probably hiding at home, too embarrassed to show her face in public. I felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness watching my son's case fall apart. This was my child, and seeing him exposed as a liar and a fraud broke my heart even as it vindicated me. During a brief recess, Marcus cornered me in the hallway. "You think you're so smart," he hissed. "But this isn't over. If I can't get that money legally, I'll find another way." His words sent a chill down my spine. What was he planning now? Michael appeared beside me. "Is there a problem here?" Marcus backed away, but his eyes promised this fight was far from finished. 2 days later, I was washing dishes when I heard a knock at my door. Through the peephole, I saw 2 police officers on my porch. "Mrs. Willis, we need to speak with you about an incident report filed by your son." My heart sank as they explained. Marcus had filed a complaint claiming I'd attacked him during his last visit to my house. According to his story, I'd thrown a coffee mug at his head and threatened him with a kitchen knife. "Ma'am, we have to take this seriously," the older officer said. Your son says he's afraid for his safety. I invited them inside and calmly explained what really happened. Marcus had come to pressure me about signing papers, got angry when I refused, and stormed out. There was no violence of any kind, but the officers had to follow protocol. They wrote up a report and advised me to avoid contact with Marcus until the court case was resolved. After they left, I sat in my kitchen shaking with rage. How could my own son tell such horrible lies about me? He was trying to make me look dangerous and unstable. Then I remembered something that made me smile. Tom had installed security cameras around our house 2 years ago after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood. Everything was recorded. Michael and I reviewed the security footage together, and it was even better than I'd hoped. The cameras clearly showed Marcus arriving alone, looking angry. They captured him shouting and waving his hands while I remained calm and never moved toward him. Most importantly, they showed him storming out while I stood peacefully by the kitchen sink. No thrown mugs, no knives, no violence at all. In court, when we played the video, you could hear people gasp throughout the room. Marcus was caught in another bold-faced lie, and this time there was video proof. As you can see, Your Honor, Michael said, Mrs. Willis never threatened or attacked her son in any way. In fact, the footage shows Mr. Willis as the aggressor in this situation. The judge was visibly angry now. Mr. Willis, filing a false police report is a serious crime. I'm ordering a full investigation into your actions throughout this case. Marcus's lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Agnes, who had reluctantly returned to court, was crying openly in the gallery. For the first time, I felt like justice might actually be served. But I knew Marcus wouldn't give up easily. He was desperate now, and desperate people do dangerous things. The investigation moved quickly. Court officers discovered that Marcus had attempted to access my bank accounts multiple times using forged authorization forms. The bank's security department had flagged the attempts, but hadn't reported them because they were unsuccessful. More damaging evidence emerged. Emails between Marcus and Agnes discussing how to prove Mom's incompetence and get control of the money before she wastes it all. Even Betty Sullivan, the neighbor who'd lied about my suicide threats, was questioned. Under pressure, she admitted that Agnes had paid her $500 to testify falsely. Michael presented all of this to the judge in a devastating presentation that left no doubt about Marcus's true motives. Your Honor, this case represents a coordinated attempt to defraud an elderly woman of her rightful settlement. The plaintiff has forged documents, filed false police reports, and suborned perjury, all in pursuit of money that never belonged to him. The judge listened with growing disgust. When Michael finished, he announced that he was not only dismissing Marcus's petition, but also referring the case to the district attorney for possible criminal charges. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm awarding Mrs. Willis damages for defamation and emotional distress. Marcus sat frozen as his lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. After the hearing, Michael filed our countersuit for defamation, fraud, and emotional damages. We asked for $200,000 in damages, plus all legal fees. Marcus tried to laugh it off when reporters cornered him outside the courthouse. This is ridiculous, he told a local news crew. I was just trying to protect my mother from making bad decisions. But his confidence was cracking. Agnes had completely cut ties with him after her own legal troubles began. His wife Angela reportedly moved back to her mother's house with the boys, embarrassed by all the negative publicity. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about the case. Son's greed backfires in court battle over settlement. For Marcus, who'd always cared about his image in the community, the public humiliation was devastating. But he wasn't finished yet. That evening, he called and left me a voicemail that made my blood run cold. If I go down for this, I'm taking you with me. You haven't won yet. I saved the recording and sent it immediately to Michael. 3 weeks later, we were back in court for the final hearing. Marcus looked terrible, thin, unshaven, and wearing a wrinkled suit. The stress of impending criminal charges and a messy divorce was clearly taking its toll. But I had one last surprise for him. Michael stood up and addressed the judge. Your Honor, we have new evidence that proves Mrs. Willis was never at risk of losing her settlement, regardless of the outcome of her son's petition. He handed documents to the court showing that I'd quietly transferred most of the settlement money into an irrevocable trust months earlier, right after Tom died. The trust was in my name only and couldn't be touched by any court order or legal challenge. Marcus's jaw dropped open. All his scheming, all his lies, all his betrayal, it had been for nothing. The money was beyond his reach no matter what happened. Your Honor, I asked permission to speak. I created that trust because I knew Tom would want his settlement to help people, not destroy families. The money is safe, and it will be used for good causes in his memory. Marcus's lawyer stood up and announced he was withdrawing from the case immediately. You didn't tell me about this trust, he said to Marcus. I can't represent a client who withholds crucial information. The judge's final ruling was everything we'd hoped for. He dismissed Marcus's petition entirely, awarded me $175,000 in damages, and recommended the district attorney pursue criminal charges for fraud and perjury. Mr. Willis, the judge said sternly, your actions in this case represent a betrayal of family trust that this court finds deeply disturbing. You have not only attempted to defraud your mother, but have shown a complete disregard for truth and decency. Agnes was ordered to pay additional fines for her role in the forgery and perjury. The judge specifically mentioned how her vindictive gossip campaign had damaged my reputation in the community. As we left the courtroom, I walked past Marcus one final time. He looked broken and defeated, slumped in his chair while his former lawyer packed up files. I stopped beside him and whispered, "You could have just been my son. That was all I ever wanted." His eyes filled with tears, but it was too late for apologies. The damage was done, and there was no going back. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked how I felt about winning. I didn't win anything, I told them. I lost my son. Money can't fix that. 2 months later, Marcus was arrested on multiple fraud charges. The local news showed him being led away in handcuffs, and I had to turn off the television. Seeing my child like that, even after everything he'd done, still broke my heart. Angela filed for divorce and moved across the country with their boys. She sent me a brief letter apologizing for Marcus's behavior and promising to stay in touch about the grandchildren. But I knew that was probably just wishful thinking. Agnes left town entirely after her friends turned their backs on her. The same gossip network she'd used against me ultimately destroyed her own reputation. I donated a large portion of Tom's settlement to establish a legal aid fund for elderly people facing financial abuse from family members. It seemed like the right way to honor his memory, while helping others avoid what I'd been through. My house felt quieter than ever, but it was a peaceful quiet now. The constant stress and anxiety of the court battle had finally lifted. Michael stopped by occasionally to check on me, and we'd become genuine friends through this ordeal. Any regrets? He asked one afternoon over coffee. I thought about it carefully. I regret that Marcus chose greed over family, but I don't regret fighting back. 1 year later, I received an unexpected visitor. Angela stood on my porch with my twin grandsons, now 11 years old. They'd grown so much I barely recognized them. Mrs. Willis, Angela said nervously. The boys wanted to meet their grandmother. We spent the afternoon talking carefully around the painful subject of their father. The boys were curious about Tom and asked to see pictures of their grandfather they'd never met. I showed them Tom's workshop in the basement and let them play with his old ham radio equipment. For a few hours, my house felt alive again with children's laughter. Before they left, Angela pulled me aside. Marcus is getting out of prison next month, she said quietly. He's been asking about you. My heart jumped. What does he want? I think he wants to apologize, but I wanted to warn you in case you didn't want contact. I thanked her for telling me. Part of me wondered if Marcus had genuinely changed, but I wasn't ready to find out. Some betrayals cut too deep to heal, even with time. Tom would have been proud of how I handled everything. I kept his memory alive through the Legal Aid Foundation, which had already helped dozens of elderly people protect themselves from financial abuse. The local newspaper wrote a follow-up story about the foundation, calling it a positive legacy from a painful family tragedy. I never remarried or moved away from our little house. This was where Tom and I built our life together, and I wasn't ready to leave that behind. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I'd just given Marcus the money he wanted. Maybe we'd still have a relationship. But I knew deep down that giving in to his greed would have only made things worse. The settlement money was Tom's legacy, earned through his suffering and death. It deserved to be used for something meaningful, not wasted on Marcus's debts and poor decisions. I learned that standing up for yourself doesn't always feel good, even when you're right. Sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything else you care about, but I also learned that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. Today, I volunteer at the legal aid office twice a week, helping other elderly people navigate financial and family crises. Many of them remind me of myself 2 years ago, confused, betrayed, and feeling completely alone. How did you find the strength to fight back? They often ask. I tell them about Tom, about his final promise to keep fighting no matter what. I explain that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we love most. But that doesn't mean we have to let them destroy us. The foundation has grown beyond my wildest expectations. We've prevented millions of dollars in elder financial abuse and helped families heal from betrayal and greed. Marcus never contacted me after his release from prison. I heard through the town gossip network that he moved far away and changed his name. Maybe that's for the best. I still miss the son I thought I had. The little boy who used to help Tom in the workshop and promised to take care of me when I got old. But that person might have never really existed. Instead, I focus on the good I can do with the time I have left. Tom's settlement became something beautiful after all, not through family, but through helping strangers who needed protection. I lost my husband, but I refused to lose myself. And that, I've learned, is the only victory that really matters.